So can I open the floor to the first question?
Thank you both very much for the talk. Mine's, I suppose, doesn't really a question, maybe just an observation, but I'd love to kind of hear what your experience is. I would love and work in an area that still has a lot of dissident Republican activity. And some of the women that we would have worked with have experienced what you talked about earlier, threats from an ex-partner, saying that it's from a paramilitary organisation. Now, sometimes the ex-partner could be in the organisation, or sometimes he's alluding to that. But what their experience ends up being is if these women do go to the police, it often becomes that the police are more interested in what that woman knows about the paramilitary organisation, who is involved, is her family, who can she name, and her whole experience or why she's there in the first place gets lost completely. And coming from those type of communities, obviously if you feel that you're being some sort of informant or given information, it actually leaves the woman in a more vulnerable position after going to the police. So I just worry sometimes that women in those kind of communities are completely unheard, and even after the awful murder of young Lyra McKee in Craigan, there's a lot of young women whose partners would be part of the main organisation who are responsible, but we would find that because of sometimes media demonisation maybe of anyone connected, that completely discourages any engagement or work that maybe we would have already done with those young women, because once their partner is saying the media and everyone else is against us, she cuts off any kind of pathways that she had to get out of that. So I just kind of like to hear your experiences.
Would you mind if I take that first, actually, and then I'll pass on to our two experts? Just drawing on my experience with the policing board, when I looked at the area, what I would like to share with you is the police are aware that a woman in that situation moves very quickly from being a victim to being treated as a witness to something else and as a source of information which can be used by CID or other parts within the policing organisation. Now, while they're aware of it and they've been assisted in how to change that mindset and treat the person as a victim and take them through the journey, the prosecutorial journey, without any baggage of anything else, it's still not quite happening. And I think they need to be reminded, perhaps, that, and certainly within a Monica talked about the human rights context, adopting a human rights approach to this and relying on the Human Rights Act would not permit that, because the duty is to protect, first and foremost, and it's victim-centred. So I do think the police need to really, once and for all, change their mindsets and see only a victim and what the victim needs, and not see a source of information or a way into a community.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, you know, that word will then get out, and that does not help us to have both the victim and the witness, more of them to come forward. That was much more the case in 1992, and, of course, the famous Maria Cahill case, which exposed this. She did come to see me when I was Human Rights Commissioner, and I advised her to take this up with the Police Ombudsman. And the Police Ombudsman has spoken out on this issue, because it should be a formal complaint. It's not part of police practice and domestic violence to go seeking information on political violence or any other political information. So you're quite right to bring that up, and that if it's still happening, it's quite shocking. I thought one of the other things I didn't talk about, and it would be good to know, and I hope it isn't, because I've done a lot of work with the police on this, was that the serving of non-molestation orders and exclusion orders, that they said, sure, the dog's in the street, know where to find him, but he's not being served with it. And then questions would be asked, well, he must be more useful to the police in another way. And so all of this comes from our conflict, it's all related. And I'm sure there's a police officer, I hope there's a police officer in the audience who might want to respond to that. But I certainly know all the training and your work on the policing board and your human rights reports have said that a human rights framework has to be adopted and at the centre of the practice. And you will lose the onus on community policing if that's the kind of response. But I thank you for your point. And in our workshop yesterday, Aisling and I heard the two support workers from Women's Aid talking about this, and also saying that part of the problem sometimes is that those women who are partners of paramilitaries, where there's drugs and where there's debts, and they're putting those over onto the women, and that's another form of coercive control. And the women are terrified, and they're finding this in Foyle, and I'm sure Foyle isn't an exception. I certainly heard it in East Antrim and in other places, was the amount of, not just the intimidation of partner violence, but the financial abuse, the coercive control, the debts that women were being made to take on, and then the concern that the guys were part of paramilitaries. And this money, you know, the loans that paramilitaries have now got. I recently was in Carrickfergus and I was shocked at the extent to which paramilitaries have now become the alternative banks. So this is, you know, this is what we're facing. So yes, very good point. And if you do have cases like that, through Women's Aid, or through a solicitor, or straight to the police ombudsman. Mary Anderson is now the police ombudsman, and she has worked on this issue in the past, and hopefully she would collect that, and clearly that should be a current issue. And that with a new chief constable coming on, those are the kinds of things we want to tackle.
Thank you. I don't have much to add, given what Monica and Alison have said, but just to say thank you for raising that. You know, and I think for me it just reinforces this idea of, you know, how we understand the context to the violence that occurs here, and that it's not just about training our service providers around responding to domestic abuse. It's about responding to the critical elements and how they're going to exacerbate that experience of violence in the home by not, I mean, clearly they will understand, as you've outlined, exactly what they're getting out of the contact with that woman. But it's, you know, it's the importance of us nominating and naming how this has happened, what's going on, and how that impacts women's experiences of violence in a context such as this.
There is £10 million coming down for communities in transition in Northern Ireland, and Joe and I went in before Christmas. We were the only two women there and all the boys, and there is a wellbeing section in that. But when I asked had they done anything in domestic violence, no, they hadn't thought about it, anything on sexual violence, being that we were in the year that we had the most horrendous rape case in the courts. Nothing on that. And they hadn't looked at any of Monica's research. And to many women, you know, their stories, even if they don't want to do anything about it, they deserve to be told, and we need to know what happened to them, and we need to make the changes. So why are they being left out? And this is government. £10 million. They keep telling us they're too poor to pay us for all the work we do, but £10 million coming down. That is a disgrace, and a wellbeing section that isn't looking at the issues of what faced women here throughout Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and what's still happening on a daily basis here needs to be addressed, because we don't have peace while women are still being tortured.
And towards the end of your presentation, you talked about creating a space where women in conflict resolution can heal and speak. In response in the United States, in response to the election of he who shall not be named, we've had recently a great movement towards getting women elected into office, and we had this tidal wave of women being elected. So a couple questions. One is how effective do you think in the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland getting women elected into office or be placed on the judiciary will create that space? How effective will that be? And then is there conversations, support, murmurings about trying to get more women elected into office?
Just to comment around, you know, placing women into positions of power, and of course we know it makes a difference, and we can talk about tipping points and all of that. I think we also need to acknowledge that we place an awful burden on women. It's not up to women to go in and, like, it is, unfortunately, becomes up to women to go in and make the changes that need to be made. But it's actually onto the systems and structures themselves to change, to allow for everybody's voices, everybody's approach, everybody's needs to be addressed. And I think there is at the global level, particularly, I do a lot of work with the United Nations at global level on implementation of law and policy in the aftermaths of conflicts. And all they talk about is women's participation, and it's so important. So I'm not saying that it's not. But then it's like, okay, women, go and fix it. And and they're also feeding their kids, recovering from rape, all these other things that women are coping with. And I think, we absolutely need women's representation on an equal par with men, not 20%, 30%, on an equal par with men. There will be all sorts of different kinds of women, rural, urban, different political persuasions as well. All of that needs to be represented, women of different colour, etc. But, we need to be careful that the onus is on those in power now to make the kinds of decisions and choices that allow for policy that is inclusive of everybody. And the onus is on men to do that as well.
Yes, some of our parties here have, I don't think what you have in the States, which is affirmative action, quotas. And the mayor of Derry is from a party in which they have a quota. And they have quotas standing for election and quotas women getting into safe seats. And some of the laws in the South are now changing where they have to put women on the lists or they'll get fined. And I'm totally in favour of all of that, because when we wrote that into the peace agreement about equal and full participation, we didn't put anything in that was about affirmative action. We left it to the great political will of the champions, and they never did it. And so the numbers didn't change. They are changing now, and you may not know it, but we have 3 political leaders who are all women on 3 parties. And the question is, what difference have they made? And I think, people are very hard on the fact that it is 3 women, but at least it changes the picture for the next generation to see that women can do these jobs. When we had 2 female Irish presidents, young children were saying, can a man be a president? Because we simply had one woman following the other. And I think it just changes the picture, which I can do this too. And that's why I think in the States it's good to see these women coming forward. Because remember, legislators make a difference. You've got that issue now in your Supreme Court. And likewise, our judges make a difference. And those women, the 2 women that have been appointed to the High Court, it's the first time since the partition of Ireland. Like, we had to wait 75 years to have 2 women on the High Court.
But then we got 2 at once.
yeah, like a bus. yeah, you wait and 1 and 2 come along. But, it's good that they are there. And now I believe there's an exhibition in the law school at Queen's showing how women have come up through and telling their stories and to other students that all of this is possible. But we need more. And that's why, if it's a manel, they may not get that attention. Some of these issues that gender-specific violence wouldn't get that attention, because the harms that happen to women are different than the harms that happen to men. And you need them named, you put them on the agenda, and then you deal with it. It's like I'm a survivor of breast cancer, and I found it was a huge difference when I was sitting on the health committee, because a number of us who were breast cancer survivors were able to talk about the services that were needed in Northern Ireland. And we didn't have the drug tamoxifen at the time, and I didn't have breast cancer at the time, but I remember thinking, and as a Human Rights Commissioner, I ended up having to take a case to court to get tamoxifen into Northern Ireland. And I wondered, had a man been either on the committee or been the Chief Commissioner, would we have got tamoxifen? And so there is a different perspective there. I'm sure you know all this. But I think we still have some way to go. But I don't know if the rest of you feel this way, but I just hope that we're now beginning to chip away at that culture that had an absence of women's voices for so long. And that comes as a result of conflict, but it also comes as a result of culture.
I think we'll probably wrap up there, but it's a good point to remind ourselves what we saw before the break, the Teen Link project and the women's voices. That's our hope for the future, and that's where this is. That's what's going to change all of this, is those women and those young people.